evening, everybody. Welcome to the session where we're having conversations that shape cannabis culture. I'm Alex. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Sessions by the Bay. San Diego's first and only cannabis lounge. We created the session to have and host conversations about cannabis, and not just the product, but the people, the culture, and the policies that shape how we experience it. And tonight we're talking about probably the most consequential shift in cannabis policy in generations, and that is rescheduling of cannabis from Tier 1 to Tier 3. And we're going to talk about how that impacts the everyday consumers. Helping me guide this conversation, we have a true cultural connector, somebody whose fingerprints are all over California cannabis, and that is Mr. Mikey Kush.
Thank you for having me.
Mikey is the creator of Nothing But Fire. It's a platform honoring craft cannabis and legacy operators. He's also one of the genius minds behind the network show, which is arguably one of the most influential cannabis trade shows here in California. So super glad to have you here, Mikey.
It's actually that's a
And instead of talking about Schedule 3, through headlines or sound bites, we brought together some people that can talk about it from different sides of how this policy will impact us. So that's law, that's medicine, that's policy and industry. To help us, get a better understanding of the real world implications and maybe the bigger picture of what this shift means. First, we have Dr. Neil Patel, a board-certified physician and cannabis health advocate. Dr. Patel brings a medical and patient-centered perspective, helping us understand what policy shifts like Schedule 3 mean for research, for medicine, and just wellness in general. Then we have Mr. Lance Rogers here, attorney at law in San Diego. A long-time cannabis attorney in the region. Lance is going to help us break down what Schedule 3 actually means from a legal standpoint, what changes, what doesn't change, and what maybe we ought to be paying attention to. And joining us from a policy and advocacy perspective, we have Shelby Huff-Aker, Chair of Americans for Safe Access. She's the Chair of Americans for Safe Access here in San Diego, one of the original cannabis advocacy organizations in the country. She's going to bring a patient rights and community lens to the discussion, how these policy changes impact access, equity, and the patient impact. And then finally, Claudio Miranda. And he is the co-founder of Budist, which is a consumer-focused product education and consumer trust building website. Claudio is bringing us an industry and cultural perspective. He's also a co-founder of Guild Extracts, which I remember back at my shop back in 2015.
Guy's legendary.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time. So hopefully you can help us talk about how policy decisions like this impact product quality, innovation, and the experience that consumers have with these products. So together this panel represents medicine, law, policy advocacy, and cannabis culture. Mikey and I are going to guide the conversation with a few questions, and then we're going to open it up. These guys might have questions for each other. So let's get into the session. And actually, let me start with you, Mikey. You ready?
Yep. Let's get it.
You've been around for a long time. You've been here since it was underground, then Prop 215 medical.
The good old days.
Good old days. Then adult use, and now we're talking about federal rescheduling. What's your first instinct or reaction to that? And why do you think there's a lot of people out there that are confused or maybe skeptical about whether this is a win?
Well, first of all, we don't know what's been win or not, right? But the understanding I was telling you earlier was if someone has money, now they can come in and it's safe for them. Their investment is not risky, right? So if you're a billionaire, you come in, jump into the median, and there'll be tons and tons of money for people like us to get consulting gigs or to start projects or, open a lounge or, or lounges, right?
Okay, well, I mean, Lance, I guess from a legal perspective, does it actually mean that, what are one or two things that are actually changing or not changing, by rescheduling?
Okay. Nothing has happened yet.
Okay.
Boo.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that's great, right?
I'm just gonna drop a bomb on the group in the show. Sometimes politicians don't tell the truth. So, and that was probably the first time anybody's hearing it.
You know.
Yeah. So I just like looking at a potential future kind of sort of thing that's gonna happen. I'm always just a little skeptical. As a lawyer, it's easy to look at the law and advise a client, oh, here's what the law says, so if you do this, this is what should happen. But when it's kind of, so what did Trump do? Trump signed an order on December 18th directing the Attorney General to, as soon as reasonably possible, to deschedule cannabis to Schedule 3, reschedule cannabis to Schedule 3. Do we have a time frame? No. Do we know what that process looks like? No. I mean, another quick reminder too is that Biden did this in his term, but he just kind of did it in sort of like the Biden way, which is like, let's have a committee and let's have lots of people talk about it and go through trials. Trump's just like, do it. And so, hopefully, so from a legal standpoint, nothing has happened yet. Something will happen in the future. I completely agree with what Mike was saying earlier about like this is going to help businesses. And so depending on how you feel about businesses and corporations and how they help you, then maybe this is a good thing. If you bought something on Amazon and you're like, Amazon's cool, I don't care if Jeff Bezos is a billionaire and hangs out with Donald Trump. I get something on my door in a half hour if I want. Then maybe that would be good for consumers. And maybe you will be able to get CBD isolate paid by your health insurance, like Donald Trump also said. But
Not we,
what's that?
but not we.
But not we. But maybe
Boo.
someday, and it'll be delivered by a drone by Jeff Bezos. So look, yeah, he said, reschedule up to 3 as soon as possible. Take a look at CBD, and then that's what happened. And then other than that, it's still illegal under federal law for the time being.
Okay, this feels a little different though this time around. He was pretty serious. He gave a date. I thought he gave a date at the end of January for some action to take place. Let's assume it kind of moves forward. Shelby, like from an advocacy perspective, do you have any concerns about like how this might impact patient access or what things are being considered? From the consumer's perspective, we can talk about businesses, and how it impacts us, but what about the consumer?
Absolutely. So I think, it is important to know what might be a benefit from a Schedule 3 rescheduling. And in that regard, I would say, more recognition of cannabis as a therapeutic medicine, definitely. And then also, some potential easing of restrictions around research. Unfortunately, I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic in terms of what it will actually change for patients. It does not actually integrate state cannabis programs into federal law. So those are still out of compliance with federal law. And it also doesn't do anything to address a lot of the bias and discrimination that patients still face. So, maybe just a show of hands here, how many people have experienced an inability to consume cannabis in the way you'd like, or it's therapeutically indicated in your own home, right? Or maybe you faced employer discriminations because of drug testing requirements, right? Or, just not having cannabis be able to be prescribed through the VA, or, educational loans. So these are the types of things that make me a little bit more skeptical about a Schedule 3 decision, because they don't really meaningfully address the issues that really affect patients.
Do you agree with that kind of concern? Like from a legal standpoint, does the legal framework, if it does shift the Schedule 3, have a risk of leaving out patients?
Well, so there's just so much that needs to come along with Schedule 3. Like, Donald Trump can say make it Schedule 3, but that involves, the FDA process, and that could take a long time. And then it involves, where do you get it? You get it at Walgreens and CVS. So from a patient standpoint, where am I going to go? Am I going to go to my local dispensary? Am I going to be forced to go to CVS in the future to get my meds. I guess the one thing that I would agree with is like, is hopefully maybe it does help with the stigma side. Because, you know, if Donald Trump is saying, this is normal people, and patients feel more normal because of it, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, okay, so a lot of people do say that going to Schedule 3 isn't going far enough, that should be fully rescheduled. And that it opens the door for big government, big pharma, sort of take things over. Maybe that's learning our industry a little bit.
A lot of it.
Yeah, right. But before we go down that rabbit hole, Dr. Patel, as it moves to Schedule 3, what if anything are you genuinely excited about or cautious about when it comes to the research or the medicine and just maybe patient care, how you interact with your patients?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, do you guys know what scheduling means? Who do here know what scheduling even means? Alright, so let's real quickly, what happened in 1970, the Controlled Substance Act was passed, basically deeming cannabis illegal and creating a framework for certain drugs to have medical value or not have medical value. Schedule 1 was considered zero medical value and very high tolerance and addiction potential. Cannabis, psilocybin, LSD, heroin falls under that category. Right? So what happened is from one day to the next, cannabis went from having no medicinal value to Schedule 3, which now has medicinal value but still some addiction potential. On my end, I think patient care, we're not there just yet, but what Schedule 3 means for research, a lot easier to access research dollars for cannabis studies. Once you get cannabis research, then you get data. Data people understand objective endpoints. So from that, I'm hoping that will open up even more doors for patients for getting cannabis.
And that research there, it can lend to product innovation. I know you guys have been very in tune with that since as field extracts, extracting THCA, THCV, coming through, identifying these important molecules. Do you think that's going to help you, or do you see there's some maybe secret risks with that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's going to help. I mean, just generally speaking, I think it's Schedule 3 for sure doesn't go far enough. I mean, just descheduling altogether, we can all agree. Just realizing it is going to be the best outcome. But is it a step in the right direction? I feel 100% it is. I think it's moving things forward. I mean, we have to remember what things are crucially at stake, right? It's information suppression, it's institutional bias, right? It's really it's stigmatizing a plant that now, if it becomes more accessible for research, for medicine, you're starting to lift that stigma a little bit more. You're starting to make it more socially acceptable. You're starting to alleviate some of that institutional bias that we've seen for decades now. On the question of, with field extracts, we've been, for about 12 years, been making isolates, THCA isolate, CBD isolate. And with rescheduling to Schedule 3, I mean, really what that does is that it brings it, what we're looking at is FDA-approved drugs, right? That now you can create drugs, which is hard to do with whole plants, right? When you look at botanically derived, products, right? Like cannabis is, this is a whole plant medicine. So really, in order to really get it in the FDA product pathway, as it's called, it's going to be a lot easier to do that by isolating the active ingredients. And that's what you find with most pharmaceutical products that we access every day, is that you have what's called APIs, the active pharmaceutical ingredient. And the key that we need to really look out for in a lot of this legalese and everything that you'll be seeing in the news is, are we going to see THC in its naturally derived form be classified as an active pharmaceutical ingredient that can be accessible as a bulk drug, right? In parallel, we look at something like ketamine that is Schedule 3, right? So if you think, am I going to be able to access cannabis under Schedule 3? Well, anybody that tries to get ketamine today, it's readily available. You can literally go online right now and get ketamine delivered to your door. And it's a Schedule, and it is a Schedule 3 drug. Now, but you've got to look underneath the structural layers of how ketamine gets to your door And it goes through what actually kind of harkens back to the Prop 215 days, where you've got to go through telehealth, like you've got to see a doctor. So for those of you that were around in the Prop 215 days, right, we used to go see a doctor, you should get a prescription, I get that prescription and then go to my local medical dispensary, right? Well, now I can do that right now with ketamine. I can basically go onto a website, it's basically a telehealth practitioner that I can basically say, hey, I've got anxiety, I've got depression, they prescribe me ketamine, and through the back end, it goes through a series of kind of steps like we used to do in the Prop 215 days. But the net is I get ketamine to my door like the same day, right? So from a patient access perspective, I think we're gonna actually see like a lot of cannabis accessible, more accessible, but the key thing here, and I know it's a little rambling, but just the key thing to watch and the differences with ketamine is a bulk drug again. It's an API, an active pharmaceutical ingredient, where then it can be blended. It can be what's called compounding pharmacy access to it under compounding law, where you can now get ketamine delivered to you because it's this active ingredient that's been FDA approved. And that's because ketamine was FDA approved in 1999. Since then, a lot has changed in that FDA pathway of allowing bulk drugs. So the key thing that we want to watch out for is THC, or CBD for that matter, going to be allowed as an active pharmaceutical ingredient on a bulk level. If that happens, then it's going to be accessible in every way imaginable, and it's going to be a really good thing. If it's restricted to just the one drug and the one application, like we see with Marinol, which is a synthetic THC, not a plant-derived, then it's going to take a little bit longer for us to get access to those products. And the very last thing I just want to say is, let's not forget that there are 4 cannabis markets that we're dealing with here: illicit, state-regulated, hemp, and now Schedule 3. And I think it's highly unlikely that Schedule 3 is going to take over those other 3 markets. I think you're always going to see illicit. The state markets are probably going to continue to exist in parallel. Hemp is TBD based on how the Farm Bill revision goes. And we're going to see what happens with Schedule 3. But just remember that the access today will, and when this goes into effect, will be across 4 different markets where you can access these products.
And if anybody needs ketamine, you can see Claudio.
There you go, right?
I'm one of those telehealth guys.
Doctor's right here. He's right there. He takes cash, Zelle, Venmo.
He's the doctor on my website.
We can edit that, right? We talked about
Yeah, you can cut that out, right?
edit that out.
That one's staying in. Okay, so then that's something I think is really important, is that in California, adult use regulations in the current framework was passed via voter initiative. It's been Schedule 1, and now it's going to a lesser sort of situation with Schedule 3. If anything, we should feel a bit more comfortable, I would think, right, as an industry or as dispensaries. Like, customers shouldn't expect their dispensaries to go away, or their current, supply chains to sort of vanish. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Lawyer?
Well, I mean, it's
Suits.
Appreciate you, but
right. No, it's fine. Better call Saul, So there's the industry part of it we were talking about earlier. Like, the dispensaries could go away because they run out of business.
They ran out of money.
Because they ran out of money. So if this helps, those small businesses take a normal tax deduction, because that's a big thing that's happening right now. Now they can finally file their taxes like a normal business, and they don't go out of business, and that's a good thing. But it's just great being here with Asa, because I remember, back a long time ago, being in pretty hairy situations with police, and it was like, well, it's legal, this is medical and everything. Well, like when a cop has a gun pointed at you, and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do in this situation. So like right now, certain law enforcement agents, ICE, are harassing, patients and customers outside of dispensaries who are from other countries. So imagine people coming, someplace, they're like, oh, I want to go to Sessions, that sounds really cool. And you're walking to your car and somebody approaches you and says, show me your papers, you're on a tourist visa? You have marijuana on you? Well, when you came to the US, you agreed not to smoke marijuana. So, you're coming with us. So that's where, I'm always cautiously optimistic. But ACE's always there to back people up. ACE's got your back.
ACE's always there. We're also always there to keep it Debbie Downer. I do, I think one thing that is important to remember too is that what has protected state cannabis programs for the past 12 years now has been the Medical Cannabis Amendment in the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Bill. For the first time since 2014, last year, the House Appropriations Committee removed the CJS Medical Cannabis Amendment. So what that amendment says is that you can't use federal dollars to interfere in state cannabis programs. With Schedule 3, like I was saying earlier, it doesn't actually integrate state programs into federal law. So unless we have comprehensive federal legislation to integrate those programs, they will always be vulnerable. The CJS Medical Cannabis Amendment was never meant to be a permanent measure. We need more long-lasting solutions.
What do you think we ought to be, I guess, as consumers advocating for right now as they consider rescheduling, as they work towards it? There are opportunities for us to advocate for what we need out of it.
Absolutely. I would say the biggest thing is just to keep putting the pressure on your federal legislators. Right now, a lot of what those legislators are hearing is from prohibitionist groups and large corporations. They're not hearing from patients or everyday consumers. Keep expressing your concerns. And, Americans for Safe Access, we do have a comprehensive federal legislative framework, the Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Act, and we have a whole toolkit on our website that you can use to send letters to your Congress members.
Me being in the industry for a very long time, I feel like we've got this far because of the medical value of cannabis. It was kind of what the feeling that we had that this was a just movement. You're right, what we were doing to fight for it and to get it legal and get it into the hands of more people. Even if you're an adult use consumer or recreational consumer, you get medical value out of cannabis, in my belief. So I'm hoping that maybe with research, with some, I think, normalization, that conversations with doctors can happen more, like studies come out. Is there a situation where health insurance starts to cover some of these expenses? Would that require that integration you talked about?
Yeah, I know Trump kind of mentioned something about CMS, Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, to possibly get a reimbursement. I think about $500 for CBD specific products from Medicare. We don't know where that stands. It was just an initial kind of encouragement. I think I wonder if what we're really trying to do is obtain data, right? Medicare, United Healthcare. You guys ever heard of Epic, EMR, electronic medical records? Okay, they own about 250 million data of different patients in the world. So imagine how much data is collected. CMS is about 70 million individual patients. So by us opening this now Schedule 3 for cannabis, I think down the line it would be great for consumers, but I wonder what will they do with the data. But realistically, I think we're still moving in a good direction.
Is that policy requirement or a legal requirement for health insurance, or is it their own decision to cover cannabis?
I think when you're talking Medicaid, that's really a federal, legislative thing that's going to cover, right? Depending on the administration, there might be policy decisions which, for whatever reason, they decide not to cover a certain thing, I think during that period of time.
I think if Medicare kind of runs the show. Let's put it this way: when I bill insurance, Medicare sets the billing premiums in a sense. So if Medicare gives a green light, all other insurance or private insurance companies will fall in line. So that's why a lot of it is being focused on them. And as you know, our senior population is on the rise. 10,000 people turn 65 every day in this country. So by 2035, ages 65 and older will outnumber 18 and younger for the first time in American history. So there's a lot of interest in medical for that reason, for them to get it approved.
Well, I think a big part of it too is just like use cases, right? Like, why are you consuming cannabis? As we know, the main kind of bifurcation is adult use or recreational versus medicinal, right? But at the end of the day, when we think about like pharmaceutical drugs, when you think about Schedule 3 and FDA approved drugs, I mean, loosely again, we're talking about like isolates, we're isolating THC, we're isolating CBD, we're creating pharmaceutical drugs. That process is very costly and time consuming. You've got to go through about 5 different phases of clinical trials if you're introducing a new drug, of which most cannabis products would be new. There's only a few that have been created thus far, like for CBD, for seizures, or again, like Aeronol with THC. But there'd be a lot of novel drugs that come out that target very specific use cases. So if I say, I want to create a drug that targets like migraine headaches or something, I can go through the process as a company for now applying for that through the FDA process. I need to register with the DEA on the one hand, I need to apply with the FDA, I need to get like GMP certified facility. There's all sorts of hoops I've got to jump through. That FDA product pathway is about a 10+ year process of getting a drug from original like ideation, of submitting your application for like investigating its medicinal utility, to the time where you actually get a drug out the other end, about 10 years, $10+ million. So it's a very expensive, very time consuming process. And that's where it's headed. But that again is just use cases for people that want a pharmaceutical drug that says this drug satisfies this specific use case, like migraines or back pain or something. If you want like whole plant medicine, whether that's for medicine or for recreational purposes, that pathway isn't really going to satisfy that, not at least in the near term. You're going to still be relying on state-regulated programs and the products that come out of it, or the hemp industry, depending on how that evolves, or again, the illicit one.
So what you're saying is that we're good for like 10 years, and this is for all the rich people who set up all their corporations to be ready to go in about 10 years.
Well, we'll see. The way it could take shape is that if it goes down a certain pathway, the FDA product, the standard FDA product pathway, it can take a long time. There are shortcuts to that pathway. There are ways of expediting that. There are ways of broadening the rules of that,
Money.
where it could be short.
Money.
But we'll see. But on the point of money, which is another good topic, is the 280E, right? And that benefits all of us right away the minute that goes into place, is alleviating the 280E tax burden, which I'm not sure that's a topic here.
Yeah, well, it definitely helps for businesses.
My understanding with the 280E issue is that it would still not apply to businesses that are, selling what is considered a federally illegal substance. So I think with the 280E exemption, I don't know if that would actually apply to state cannabis programs, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
We need an accountant on the panel for that.
Well, actually, on the legal point, there's never been a legal precedent where a Schedule 3 drug was prosecuted for a 280E violation. So in other words, any drug that says, so in other words, today if I take any Schedule 3 drug and I sell it illegally, you can't get me for 280E, and there's never been a legal precedent for getting me on 280E related tax implications. You can get me for tax evasion, you can get me for other related crimes, but 280E has never. So in other words, for all Schedule 3 drugs in the market for all of history, so short history, 280E does not apply.
You don't want to be the first one.
You never want to be the first one.
Yeah, I'm the first one, so learning that part.
First one's in San Diego.
It's it.
There's some out here.
There's some enough.
There's a bunch of
them.
things. Yeah. A bunch of things.
Not like this though.
That's right, baby. There's only one.
I think part of the concern people have, like as a consumer, we're excited about the research and we want that to happen. But sometimes safety is used to justify control. And there's this other fear about, industry getting taken over and how that, what the resulting product is going to be for people. And right now it's very organic, it's cool, it's small craft operators, very diverse. And diversity obviously means that it's a healthy environment right now, even though it's kind of, dealing with things.
No, it's a great point. Like for us who have been around, cannabis in San Diego since, before there was the Department of Cannabis Control, there used to be like no disrespect, but there were like really cool products that you could see with like really artistic designs and everything. And then when Prop 64 came in, there's a lot of regulations about how your package has to look, be designed and everything, and what's in it. And
All my age with a toy.
Oh, God.
yeah.
Want to have a comic book, a toy,
Yeah.
An
and then
accessory.
It's a very happy meal.
Yeah. There was this cool shit out there, and the government's like, that's attractive to children.
yeah, big ass 40-year-old children, big ass adult children. That's what it's for.
I asked somebody at a conference one time who their business tests child resistant packaging, and I was just like, what kind of science goes into that? I mean, you guys just put like a bunch of 2-year-olds in a room and see if they go. They're like, that's exactly what we do. So they're just like, okay, go, and they just watch them, for like an hour, and then if you're able to open the package, and if you can't open it, you got the green light.
That's one of the highlights about regulation, for all the risks it carries, standardized testing, understanding, child food packaging and how as a consumer you gotta respect that, and as an operator we have to acknowledge those risks too.
First of all, the child proof is like really adult proof. Because when you get an 11-year-old that shit thinking of it like nothing.
Yeah, they
Like
all
your
overdid
first thing
it.
they'd be like, here, Lana, try this. Here. Me and her mom are sitting there for half an hour. Just, I get it, And then all of a sudden she's like, oh, sure, here's the place. And she got it like nothing. You're just like, that's supposed to be child proof.
It
Like,
doesn't
I
always
guess you
make
have to have-
sense. That's for sure.
Children.
Like in California, we've really the pendulum has swung in a very far direction in terms of public protection and consumer protection and safety and all that sort of stuff. Like the amount of testing that we go through before it arrives here is unlike any botanical product in the market. And Apple has stuff on it that you buy from the grocery store here. But this thing has gone through so many testing. And I don't think the science really backs it. Like for my personal experience, I just have farmer clients who you get a call and it's like, yeah man, sorry, that one announced it didn't pass this. And I'm like, what do you mean? And in terms of batch testing, it's like, well, they just took that one little part, they tested it and it tested 99.9% of it could be perfect, but it was just the luck of the draw.
But the other flip to that could be only that 7% could be perfect, and the rest could be moldy and terrible.
I had this conversation with the DCC people, and that's right. But I think that's what dealing with the botanical product on plants is.
Yeah, well, maybe bringing it back to consumer access and connecting it to 280E. So for those that aren't familiar with 280E, there's a tax law that basically says that if you're dealing with a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drug, you cannot, as a business, so if you're like a cocaine dealer and you're selling cocaine illicitly in the
We're all
market,
over the place.
the IRS still expects you to pay taxes on that. So whether you're trafficking guns or drugs or whatever, if you're engaging in any illicit activity, the government still expects you to pay taxes on the revenue you generate from that, right? And so there's like the 280 tax law, right? So the idea is that when you go, that only applies to Schedule 1 and 2. Once Schedule 3 goes into effect, that means that cannabis companies, because we've been under Schedule 1, what that means specifically for tax law is that we can start to write off normal operating expenses. And that you can't take that lightly.
Like what?
What's that?
Like what?
Well, like things like payroll, like rent, like just marketing expenses. And so for an average company, like if you're making $10 million a year, let's say at a dispensary like this, your operating expenses might be like $4 million, right? Your taxes on that is 21%, right? It's 24%, right? So we're talking like about $700,000 to $800,000 that any other company would be able to write off the savings of that. You're now as a dispensary or as a manufacturer or cultivator, you're now going to be able to write off those expenses, which means you have a bigger bottom line. You profit more as a cannabis operator. And so if we make more money, then what that means is that we can produce products less expensively. That means we can get it to the end consumer less expensively. That means that we can better compete with the illicit market, who does not have that tax load, who does not have the compliance requirements. So what it in effect does is that it makes the operators profit more, which makes them more competitive, which makes them bring prices down, which ultimately will benefit from the consumer. So mark my words, the day that Schedule 3 goes into effect, and in the subsequent kind of period thereafter, you will see prices drop at the retail level. That is guaranteed. You're going to see that happen, and that is a net benefit to all of us, the end consumer.
So you're saying that weed people and weed dispensaries and distros and everything aren't making tons of money?
Correct.
I was gonna say, and if you use a promo code Trump at guildfs.com, you get a 30% discount on your next order.
Well, what I like about that when I hear about the 280 benefits is it does free up, like the tax burdens are unbelievable, especially when you pair that with how highly regulated it is. So it does allow us to be highly regulated, a little easier, while maybe investing more back into companies and products and so on. And even though things are like highly regulated, like the testing or the child-proof packaging, I think in an era where like we are still dealing with the stigma to some extent, it lends some confidence to the industry. People are like, okay, testing's in place, okay, child-resistant packaging is in place. It might be overdone, but at least that maybe gets us more ambassadors, more advocates, on our side, be more comfortable with it.
Absolutely, yeah, and I would say too, one thing that I'd really like to see is national standards for testing as well, because California does have pretty rigorous testing standards, but a place like Oklahoma, those standards are going to look vastly different. And so a consumer and a patient in one state might be getting a product that's much less safe from a product quality and safety standpoint, or even consistency.
God awful products.
Yeah.
Those are the god awful products.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, increasing the trust in the products, and from what you were saying, Alex, just kind of increasing general feelings about safety with a product that's more standardized, and also increasing the equity for patients between states so that they can trust that their products that they're using in Oklahoma are as safe as the products in California.
You actually brought me to think of something too, which is trademarks. And I don't know the answer to this, but what I do know is the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office of the federal government has never really registered, except for the federal government's patent, really registered a trademark for a smokable cannabis product. There's a exception for registration for things that are immoral, and so they will deny a federal trademark registration at this moment. So the big question is kind of like, okay, if we got Schedule 3, can you build the Coca-Cola brand, the Nike brand, and that consumers could go to Oklahoma and say, well, I know it's a Coca-Cola because they also have a federal trademark, and if somebody's selling counterfeit Coca-Cola, they'll get sued by the person who picked it. So
The answer is yes. They will allow, by definition, with Schedule 3, you will be allowed to engage in trademark.
So we might see more, national brands that feel like, okay, now I have a federal trademark, so I can.
Well, and this again depends, right? If it's a company that's compliant with Schedule 3, then 100% you'll get all the benefits, right? If you're let's say like a cannabis company here in California that's for adult use market, so therefore you're still basically not compliant with Schedule 3, then in that case there could be some restrictions. So that's an example of where definitely would be more restricted, that businesses with more resources will have an advantage over, let's say, a smaller operator on the state and local level in being able to get things like benefits like trademarks.
How many companies have that are ready for that? And then by resources, you need more money.
More money.
So the rich people will get to come in and beat up the list. But it's better for the end consumer because then they can just order it from Amazon from an app. Right? So
Is that what it could maybe look like in 5 years, I guess, or what should we expect?
11 years.
Well, again, that depends on how the regulations play out with drugs that get FDA approved. I mean, typically a drug doesn't have to get FDA approved. There's other ways that it can comply with Schedule 3, but that's the primary way to get something to get like an FDA approved drug for a specific medical use case. Like, yeah, there's a very long path for sure.
Or you think? No, you go ahead.
I think in terms too, like you have to understand, Schedule 3 means it is a prescription. So I would technically, as a medical professional, somebody would have to prescribe it. But as a doctor, where do I prescribe it? I don't have an electronic medical record. I cannot type in cannabis on my EMR and send it. So this is the entire background framework I think once it trickles down to patient care. Because right now it sounds great. I'm excited for my patients. I already recommend it to my patients. But for them to get like broader access as a clinician, we're gonna have to develop either the bigger healthcare systems like Kaiser, Optum. They will have to put that framework in the back end and say, hey, we want cannabis this much dosing at this time. That's step one. Then I say, who's filling that order? Is it gonna be pharmaceuticals? Is it gonna be a reputable cannabis company?
Me.
Yeah.
I'll fill it. I'll fill it. I want that drug too. I think that comes right.
The prescription, exactly. So I'll send it directly to you guys. And so that would be the idea is how to create that streamlined process so that patients, so like I prescribe drugs for my patient Amazon Prime Pharmacy. So if I was to prescribe Amazon Prime cannabis, how would that play out? So that's kind of what I do.
Trademark that.
Well, and that again does depend. I mean, looking at ketamine as a parallel example, ketamine is a Schedule 3 drug that you can readily buy and get delivered to you like in the same day, right? Now, the reason for that again is because it's classified by the FDA as a bulk, as I think there's a technical term, as a bulk ingredient drug, which means that it's off, which means that you can prescribe it off label. Right? So there's certain drugs, which is like this drug is made for this particular medical outcome, like migraine headaches. So that's an on-label prescription. Some drugs you're able to prescribe them off-label, which means it's up to the doctor's discretion as to how they prescribe it. Ketamine falls under that rubric in terms of any doctor can say, I'm going to make a medical decision that this ketamine is good for your depression, and I'm going to give you a prescription right here over telemedicine, and you'll have it at your door this evening. And
So
that's how it works today, right? That's a Schedule 3 drug.
does that mean if cannabis goes to Schedule 3 that we're automatically under that same framework?
No.
Or does there?
No, because the difference is between whether it's classified as a bulk drug, as I'm saying, versus a product-specific use case. So it's highly likely that the way it's going to unfold is that FDA will approve specific compounds like THC for very specific use cases like a migraine headache, right? Just as a simple example. And that's the only use case that you're going to be able to get that drug, right? Ketamine has this bulk status where the doctor can basically decide off-label what the medical conditions are that the doctor, because the FDA doesn't make medical decisions, they make drug decisions. It's up to the doctor to make medical decisions. And so there's nuances there, and it's all going to depend on how the law plays out.
But right now, I can go downstairs, buy an ounce of cannabis, and smoke it to my face whenever I want. It's an ounce a day, right?
Yes.
I don't need him telling me that I should only smoke a gram or whatever crazy thing, that I'm using marijuana. Like, I like being able to buy an ounce right now, whatever, or 10 grams of, what is it, 8 grams?
Yeah, and that's the case right now, right? As a medical consumer, you can talk to your doctor, you can recommend it for anything that you feel it helps.
I mean, I recommend it to patients, and every human's a patient if you really think about it. So where is the line? So I tell patients, look, especially I look at it, a lot of some of my patients are, oh, it's a drug, it's illegal. I said, well, don't look at Tylenol. You don't look at the side effects of Tylenol. There's a long list there. Like, you might be scared looking at that or ibuprofen. So I try to educate them to say this is not an end all, but this is another tool. I have a lot of patients anti-prescription pills. I will not take a prescription, but I take 30 nutraceutical supplements that I saw from Thorne online. So I must be doing well. you're substituting one pill for another pill. So I say cannabis eventually should just be a supplement more than anything, right? So we're not there yet, but I think at least this part of the process brings awareness to those who may not be even considering it as an option in terms of turning it to Schedule 3.
Yeah, like my mom, you know, she would have never thought of using cannabis, but as it became legal in California, as she hears, you know, sees it on TV basically, being talked about lately, she opened up to it, you know, for sleep specifically. Okay, so seems hard to tell, you know, where things are gonna land when it comes to this right now. And hopefully over the next, hopefully this year we get some clarity on that. At least in terms of like how the policy is moving along and so on.
I think you said we got 10 years, we're good.
10 years.
10, run it, we gotta keep running it, we got like a 10-year cap.
Um,
And if you can, try to get all the stuff that you were saying.
I mean,
So they
I'm
can-
optimistic because I think the government's gonna want some money out of this. You know, that's one of the
You want more
money? Right. So they have an incentive, and at some point they're gonna figure out, like, you know, and I think that's been the hard part is, you know, how to figure out how to monetize it. But at some point, this could move forward to where, you know, it's talked about openly with your doctor. You're able to get certain versions covered by healthcare, perhaps, and hopefully we can still exist, you know, to push the culture forward, you know, not strictly medical, because it does have value outside of, you know, specifically your an ailment you're trying to deal with. Just hopefully they don't tax it too much because it's already ridiculous.
Well, they said that alcohol had dropped like 40%.
Yeah.
So like nobody, the younger generation's not partying, they're not drinking alcohol, they're not popping bottles, they're not going to clubbing, they're not doing all that stuff.
You're healthier. And
They
cannabis,
smoke weed.
we consider healthy, you know, if you use it responsibly. Okay.
Irresponsibility still helps.
I know, yeah.
Compared to drinking alcohol, right? You drink a liter of vodka every day, you look a lot worse than if you smoke an 8 weed a day, right?
100%.
So,
All good poison, all that's, you know, rough. Okay, let me do like a little quick lightning round with you guys. And I actually think we can maybe open it up for a couple questions from the audience a little bit here. So if anybody's got a burning question, we'll try to get to. And I'll ask each of you this question. So, Neil, in one sentence, should cannabis consumers be more excited, more cautious, or more active because of Schedule 3?
I think they should be excited, but we're bringing attention to something that's natural. But cannabis has always had medicinal value. There's nothing new. Schedule 3 doesn't make it all of a sudden medicinal. It's been like this for thousands of years. Now we're bringing attention to a broader scale. So yeah, and everybody in this room can do their part. So like we said, if you're a consumer, use it, advocate for it as well.
we should write letters. I guess it's email, right?
Lance,
There's a website for it.
should people be more excited, more cautious, get more active because of Schedule 3 and why?
You're asking a lawyer, and I'm being recorded. You should be cautious.
Be excited, expect
Cautious. It's still legal under federal law. Don't talk to the cops. Remember your rights. Call a lawyer.
Call lawyers.
Yeah, 1-800 but you know, as long as you're cautious, then you can be a little excited.
Right on. Okay, well, thanks.
That was such a lawyer answer.
I'm gonna say cautious and active. I think we have a really unique opportunity right now where cannabis is gaining more acceptance, but there's still, I don't think Schedule 3 goes far enough in the way that, you know, patients don't get those protections. Patients deserve a lot more, consumers deserve a lot more, and honestly, the businesses that serve them, I think, deserve more as well. And so,
Thanks.
yeah, definitely stay active is my take on that.
Claudia, should consumers be more excited, more cautious, more active?
I would say cautiously optimistic. I would agree. I think generally, we should be optimistic that, I mean, this all provided it doesn't interfere with the state regulated programs. And at least for now, we don't think it will. I mean, there's just too much at stake on the state level. And that created just a lot of lawsuits, a lot of politics, and created a big mess. So long as the state-run programs can exist, I think we can continue to have access to beautiful lounges like this and all the great products we get to enjoy at the retail level here in all the legal states. So I think that will continue, and if anything, it's just gonna lower the prices and create a little bit more access for people who this might be a little unaffordable. So I'm all about affordability.
Nice.
All gas, no brakes, go. All gas, no brakes. Start lining up in front of cops, like, light them up, roll them, smoke them. Start taking dabs and torches everywhere, run it. Do it at the dinner table. And if you don't think I already do that, ask Keith. He's walking around here. He's taken me to dinner a couple times. We just light in the restaurant. Like, go.
Wear a session shirt while you're doing it. Actually, Claudia, that's kind of my next question, which I'm hoping is like you guys are answering just from the gut. You know, that's a short answer to. But do you think that this kind of takes the industry closer to normalization, or maybe further from its roots?
Those are two different, those things move in the opposite
Great
direction. No,
I think
I
there
think
is.
100% it normalizes, I mean, just the breakthroughs in medical research and just allowing the access to all that great research, bringing in a little bit more, lifting some of the banking restrictions, lifting the tax burdens. I think that's all just good. Very, very positive for our industry. It's a huge step in the right direction. But yeah, look, that step is for normalization and commercialization does also have the opposite outcome as it relates to the heritage and the culture that all of a sudden, cannabis becomes, very normalized. And I think with that process, you sometimes lose some of the core heritage and what brought it to life. But I think that's true of any product, really.
What do you think, Shelby?
That's a hard one. I think that I'm gonna actually say I think it takes it farther from its roots. Just the way that it will incentivize, less full spectrum, whole plant products that the movement really began with. And I also am concerned about the risk of congressional complacency. Like if we get a Schedule III decision, we saw this with the CJS amendment in 2014, where Congress kind of threw up their hands and said the medical cannabis issue is solved. And so I think if we get a Schedule III and we don't push for more, we risk not actually going the full distance.
That's actually, a great point. Does going to Schedule III complicate the process to do scheduling, or does it make it easier at some point? I'll let you try to answer that. Try to be optimistic.
These are great questions. If the federal government puts it in the medical bucket, it's like, okay, mission accomplished. It's medicine, and so for anybody else who's not using it for medical purposes, we're going to lock you up. When you asked the trick question earlier, I started out as a criminal defense attorney, 18 years ago, and there it was very serious. You're looking at some hard time in jail with what happened here, and so on the one hand, I think I'll probably miss a lot of the heritage and the authenticity that brought us to where we are today. But it's sort of the trade-off, I guess, of not going to jail for a long time.
We made a lot more money when you go to jail though.
Oh, I know. With high risk, high reward.
Okay, what about you, Dr. Patel?
I think moves towards normalization. Like on patient side, something about illegal versus legal, at least at this moment, from having no medicinal value to having medicinal value. It gives people or patients, at least on their lens, like another tool, all right? So I'm excited for that because I've had a lot of patients, I will not touch it because it's illegal and it's a drug. It's like, Tylenol's a drug, ibuprofen's a drug, right? In terms of the culture, this is the culture, right? There's history books for this reason. Create the history that you want to create. You can be part of the culture. Education is huge in terms of that. So give a shout out to Mo, Public Cannabis Public School right here. Huge in education. So please, right? The goal is to create the community to pass on the culture. If not for us, the next generation. So we get a chance to write the story and be part of it.
So I think it's been a great conversation. We've covered a lot of ground. But like I said, I'd like to see if there's any questions from the audience. Anybody have any? Thanks, Marcos.
Shout out to Marcos.
Marcos put this motion on the All right, Rudy. Got it. Okay, question. Yeah. Oh, Marcos.
Uh-oh. Check. You take my control.
Take it from this guy.
Thank you, Marcus, for this great event. Thank you to the panelists, Dr. Patel, thank you for the shout out, and listeners here. Let me just think of what I was.
If you could keep the mic as close as possible.
So, you may have touched on will the pharmaceutical companies get involved in cannabis and will it bring the heritage of cannabis? And I think there's been a history of isolating the cannabinoids since 1964, and Raphael Mechoulam isolated THC, and since then, we've been isolating cannabinoids to study them. But that's not how the plant works. The plant works as a full plant in a person's body. And pharmaceutical companies have tried to optimize the endocannabinoid system, but their products block activity at CB1 receptor. Like take, for example, rimonabant. It was a weight loss drug. People lost a ton of weight that blocks CB1 receptor, but people got very psychiatrically ill. And so that's, again, not how cannabis works. It's a modulator at receptors. It doesn't block completely and cause like a ton of these side effects. I don't think the pharmaceutical companies are interested in cannabis because of the way it's such a multimodal botanical plant.
Was there a question? Or
What do you
your
think,
senior
Dr.
panelist for us here.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, whether 25% of all pharmaceuticals are derived from plants as it is, like the exact compound. So where there's money, pharmaceuticals are involved. Cannabis, unfortunately, there is a lot to monetize. So they may not be able to fully make the best of the entire plant itself, the synergistic effects, the entourage effect. But they will find a way to say, ask your doctor if you have this migraine, ask for CBD, ask for CBG. And that will be a whole, I think we're gonna have to find a way to play nice with pharmaceuticals because they kind of run the show in this country. Pharmaceuticals and insurance companies. Basically have to, and yeah, it's a bad thing.
Yeah, I would agree with both of what you said, and great point, great question. There have been cannabinoid therapeutics on the market for a long time, and they don't tend to be well liked by consumers. So I think in that regard, I am more optimistic about there not being a whole pharmaceutical takeover. And to Dr. Patel's point, maybe for that consumer who's a little bit more comfortable, taking a pill form, then it could serve that for them as well.
I would definitely agree. I mean, again, cannabis is a whole plant medicine. There's 500 plus ingredients that go into this very complex plant, and almost by definition, you can't. Most pharmaceutical drugs are again, they're active pharmaceutical ingredients that you're isolating one ingredient or a couple ingredients, and so it's antithetical to what the plant has to offer in its natural state for sure. But I guess that's going to be the question: is can you get isolates? When you see with CBD and how it's been, Epidiolex that was approved through a natural plant extraction of that, specifically for severe epilepsy in children, and that has been effective. And I think for the parents who have had the good fortune of accessing that pharmaceutical drug, I think those are the real use cases right there. And I would argue that there's a lot of families who are very happy that they've been able to access those drugs. But it's very different. Those are, again, isolated cannabis. It's not cannabis in its natural state, that's for sure.
Are you, under Schedule 3, could you patent a whole plant cannabinoid profile, or?
So look, you can patents of plants now, it's one of the interesting things, that sort of, prohibition against registering something that is illegal or immoral by plant patents. So it's always been possible to patent, a cannabis plant like Monsanto. But like what I've talked about with my clients is kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, you can go through the whole document to get a plant patent. What are you going to do with it? Do you really want to be the Monsanto of weed? And whenever anyone's growing your plant, you send them a cease and desist letter to try to get them to licensing agreement. Like, Monsanto goes to India and other places. And I don't know if anybody really wants to be that guy.
That happened recently with, no, it was a really good report.
Yeah.
Trademark.
Yeah, the trademark thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my weed.
Well, I mean, whether it's Gorilla Glue or Girl Scout cookies or Skittles, sometimes these big, like, multinational corporations don't really, like, get the joke and think it's funny when you use their mark to, like, sell weed. So it's kind of like a matter of time. But I don't know, in terms of patenting the botanical profile of a plant, sure. I mean, I think the big question is, like, how do you monetize that? You guys remember, like several years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, when there was like a non-profit that was helping people, helping farmers like profile their genetics, and then there was this whole sort of like question about, what are they going to do with that data? And then turns out that data went to like a group that was going to use it. I think people that are very good at growing plants need to think like, man, maybe I have something special here.
Plants certain strains are often trendy, and they're hard to find, or you want to get it from the road to get it, so could be a scenario that comes up. Is there another question maybe from our audience here?
Great conversation. I'm Mallory with Goldie.
Okay.
With cannabis moving towards Schedule 3 and the potential opening of the national commerce, states now have over a decade of tax revenue from large corporations which are in these markets. Given the revenue at that state, what can we get done at a state advocacy level to ensure cannabis doesn't become dominated by the pharmaceuticals? Is there anything we can do on that front for patients, businesses?
I think I heard they said you guys are pushing for like a federal policy that would integrate the state framework.
That's right. So existing state medical cannabis programs would be given the opportunity to go through a special pharmacy, literally called special pharmacy license, that would bring them into compliance with federal law and, among other things, provide, a research and development collaboration process and potential pathways for insurance coverage as well. But I want to make sure I understand your question about the tax specific implications. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Not about the tax implications, more of the data that we have in terms of the revenue it generates for the state on a state level and what the states are doing with that tax revenue. When you look at federal levels, how much more do you want to tax? Also, where is that going towards on a federal level?
Nothing. They did nothing with it. They buy Ferraris and Lambos and houses. They did nothing with it.
No, I mean, it's a great question. Like the state of California just gave $30 million for cannabis research, which is great. But I mean, I looked at some of the projects, and there's $2 million to UCSD where they're going to make a sort of pretend dispensary, and then I guess allow a bunch of teenagers to come in and they're going to observe them and see what they might want to take so that they can sell the products. You shouldn't market your products like that with teenagers. And in my opinion, it doesn't cost $2 million to do that research. I could tell you what kids are doing. And so personally, I think there's a lot of waste for the tax money in California. Personally.
How can we get that contract?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll build a section.
I know, exactly. We need to get to that one.
Well, another example, just tying it back to trademarks, right? So to get a product trademarked for cannabis product federally has been illegal, but then the state of California said, great, we'll allow you to get a state trademark for your cannabis product. So you can actually apply for a state trademark will then So that should you try to enforce that, at least on the state level, there's state protections now legally where you can enforce that, right? So I think there's just precedent that's been set where the state could do their own thing, and obviously our whole cannabis program is an example of that, right? Where there is state sovereignty, that's a beautiful thing about our country, federalism, is that the state gets to do what it wants to do, and hopefully the federal government is not gonna kind of intervene or try to supersede the rights of the state. So despite what happens on Schedule 3, I think the hope is that we'll continue to be able to do what we need to here in our great state of California and in other states that allow medical or recreational programs.
Yeah, states can do whatever they want, except for Minnesota.
Wow. Actually, we will take a moment of silence there. I think, like what I'm excited about in that regard is California does have years of data possibly to show, you know, in terms of driving safety or just the impact on the general public, and even crime data and so on. And hopefully, as consumers, we advocate to our local politicians and carry a message up so that California itself can advocate for a policy that, you know, protects what we're developing right now. I think that's potentially a huge, you know, like opportunity that the states can participate in for us. And certainly they have some incentive to protect what they've invested so much into already in terms of our state framework.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, data is really the biggest question. Data is currency at this time, so that's literally number one. So data is a double-edged sword. Obviously, California, with its population, we have a certain amount of resources and data we can get here. But like to go back to who's getting the funding right now for cannabis in California UC systems. I used to work at UC Irvine when I went to school there. We did research. I studied my boss research. UC Irvine owns the data, not the people that research it. So there'll be a lot of interest to see as more cannabis research gets out. If they patent something, is it going to be that person or the school that owns it? That'll be a whole different conversation. You know?
Well, here in San Diego, UCSD has the Center for Cannabis Research. They're doing a study right now about how people are impacted, their motor skills, driving, after dabbing specifically. In fact, pay $390 to dab you out and then test you in a video game. I don't know, you gotta give us
I used to dab and drive, and it was the old school Home Depot torch dab. As you're driving, heating it up, driving, and then like the nail. I only got burned.
we definitely need to study this.
I mean,
You're a medical anomaly, like.
not everyone has the tolerance that I have, but I just want to throw in like to be the outliner of that. We're gonna be like, look, it can be done. They need to be able to pass this test or whatever. And I want to be like, look, just keep doing it.
How does Nike do it? Yeah. Okay. Well.
No, I want to go back and say, like, I'm all for research, and I think California's leading the country with the research. It's just the tax is so high, you know, like, I think we should kind of take a look at the amount of taxes on the products.
That may happen organically. You know, there's already cities that have eliminated their local tax because it's unsustainable the way it was. You know, high hopes for it, but the reality is people are price sensitive and you can't just overtax people.
You create a new prohibition market through overtaxation. And I love taxes, but when you're taxing something at almost 40%, that's a new prohibition.
It makes it inaccessible for a lot of people.
I do not do taxes.
Okay, so I guess one last question before we close. What's the most important thing you want cannabis consumers to take away from tonight? Let's try to keep our answers short. I'm high. Trying to keep up is hard.
What's the most important thing is just that I feel that it's advancing. That look, if we look at cannabis legalization or deregulation, whatever you want to call it, I think it's moving in a positive direction. Like incrementally, we're making steps forward. Rescheduling the Schedule 3 is certainly not perfect. It leaves out, it does not address a lot of really important things. But it is a step in the right direction. And we hope that the powers that be are just going to let it unfold in a way that's going to be beneficial to us all. And I think as Lance started the conversation, there's a lot of unknowns. So that's I think at the end of the day, we don't know. And let's just hope that that it is truly going to be a step in the right direction.
My take-home message would be not to sell for less. We have a real opportunity here, and now is not the time to sit back. We can demand more. So keep it short and sweet.
Marijuana is still legal under federal law, but I thought of a new defense tonight. We should just say, Trump told me to do it. Stop at the side of the road. I read it, I went to the thing, they told me, and that's the only reason I smoked weed tonight, officer. But yeah, just be cautious, but otherwise, it's normal. It's normal.
I think you guys should be optimistic, right? Cannabis has done so much for my life. I'm sure it's helped you guys. So if you guys enjoy the plant, respect the plant, and do something for it for once, help out the plant, right? So do your part, right? Speak up, get in touch with your local Congress members and everything.
All gas, no brakes, smoke everywhere. All gas, no brakes.
Smoking takeaway.
Smoke everywhere, light up everywhere. Anywhere they smoke a cigarette, smoke weed.
Yeah, it makes it hard to stop. Okay, well, I want to thank all